This year, it's going to be a debate on universal income, and we have a great panel here. We might be having Jeff Berwick at some time. I guess I just heard he's on Mexico time, so at some point he might show up. I hope he does. We have Ellen Brown here. So Ellen, if you haven't read her book, she wrote some great books. Web of Debt, Public Banking, and she's the, I guess, founder or still president of the Public Bank Institute, chairman of Public Banking Institute. So you're probably on the side of
I think it's a good idea, yeah.
universal income. Her and Doug Casey share the exact same viewpoint. So Doug Casey, Doug has written, I guess, how many books have you had on the best-selling for?
Brief commercial. This is the most recent one. Drug Lord, second of a sextet, reforming the reputations of unjustly besmirched, politically incorrect occupations.
1 hour.
Speculative.
Yep.
So
I've done an hour.
Yep.
I'm not writing nonfiction anymore. It's too boring.
Sorry. I said I got an hour.
Doug Casey, yeah, sorry, you got interrupted by Jesse Ventura there on that, so that's
Oh, is that Jesse Ventura?
yeah,
Oh, I'd love to meet him.
You did.
yeah.
I guess I did. Kind of.
Okay, we got Flip Filipowski, and Flip, as I introduced him yesterday, I'm calling him a futurist, but I think if you look at his past, he's done some amazing things in software. He's done now Silk Road Equity, I believe is the name of the firm. Am I saying that right? Silk Road Equity. You can introduce yourself, so the Flip.
No, that's fine.
Okay. And Flip, I think, what would you come down on universal income as just a?
Affirmative.
Okay. We have Amos Peterson. Amos is going to be here as well, has done a lot of study on universal income. And Amos, you can say something as well on yourself.
Sure. I'm a technologist and economist, and my concern is with how to implement universal basic income and if we would be able to do that with a cryptocurrency of sorts. So.
Okay, let's start off here on basic income. I won't offer my viewpoint, but so I'll try to keep it as objective as I can. It obviously isn't happening currently, and I'm going to start off with Doug
Oh,
here.
that's not true.
Yeah.
Actually, it does happen with earned income
Is
credit, I
it
would
fair to
say.
start with me because I'm the only one who appears to be against it?
I'll join you on this. How's that sound?
Oh, all right, that helps a little bit.
Yeah, so I'll take
All right. I'd rather be the first negative than the first affirmative if this is a debate, but I'll take what I can get. This impresses me as a particularly pernicious, A, and stupid, B, idea that's recently stuck its head above water, promoted by Bill Gates, who I have always considered an idiot savant. He's like the Rain Man, really good at one thing, but nothing else. Because Bill Gates said it, now people are starting to talk about it. Now, why is it pernicious? Because you've got to look at this from a moral point of view. And if you're giving something to somebody who has done nothing to deserve it, there's no exchange. Therefore, there's got to be some theft involved if there's no exchange. You're just giving it to this useless mouth for living. Yes, and I know that it's supposed to be everybody gets something. But this is a corrupting influence because if you're going to be a human being even, not a parasite, you must produce more than you consume. And there's going to be a lot of people that are going to say, hey, basic income, what is it going to be, $1,500 a month? I don't know. I need not produce. So it's going to destroy what little moral fiber these people have. So it's a really bad idea from a societal and an ethical point of view. But it's an even worse idea, if that's possible, from an economic point of view. Because what you're doing is you're sucking capital from the producers. Yes, I know the producers are all going to be robots and the robots don't count, which is another really silly idea. Of course they count. I mean, it takes capital to build robots. And yes, I know robots will build each other and so forth. But capital is, there's something that exists. I think most people are completely unaware of it. But after the law of gravity, it's the most important law in the physical universe. It's called the second law of thermodynamics. And it's the tendency of everything to wind down unless there are outside inputs of energy. That's it in a nutshell. And there is no such thing as a cornucopia that just automatically spews goods. So what it's going to do is, instead of making everybody happy so we could all live like Eloy, it's going to destroy the economy. And this basic income, it's basically a socialist idea. So if you like Zimbabwe, if you like Venezuela, if you like the old Soviet Union, if you like all of Africa, I live in South America, yeah, it's great. It's a freebie. Wonderful for the play. And worse, you need the government to administer this stuff, to take the income from whoever produces the income and give it to people who've done nothing to deserve it. So I can't think of a more stupid idea that's, traveling the meme circuit at this point.
Okay, Flip, do you have any response to any of the things you heard here? Because I know.
It hurts. My head hurts after hearing that. First and foremost, I'll try to take it back to the concept. If you're in the HR business and you employ people, today we have finally reached the conclusion that the most motivated individuals are those with which you deal as follows. You find out what their basic needs are, and you provide them with an income that is roughly equal to that amount. So if somebody can take care of their basic needs at 50 grand, 200 grand, whatever it is a year, if you give them that as their base salary, you can then motivate them to do even more under the appropriate behavior by giving them incentives to produce beyond that. But the fact is that behaviors are wrong if you provide somebody with nothing but piecework, for example, where they are under constant pressure to produce in order to pay for their family's basic needs. In that environment, they develop all kinds of bad characteristics. The panic provides incentive to steal, to cheat, to do all the things that we wish our workforce doesn't have. When you provide the basic needs and you give incentive above that level, you have an ideal employee who has the right motivation, who has no need to steal, has no need to take risks that are beyond what he's supposed to take, and performs the tasks to get the additional incentive beyond the basic needs. That is roughly the concept of basic universal income. And that is that every citizen, as a birthright, receives a couple of $100,000 on January 1st. Poor or rich, doesn't matter, billionaire, you still get your couple of $100,000. In theory, that takes care of the basic needs that you have, and you do not have to do and display behaviors that are antisocial. As you go beyond that, you can then start doing things that you really are interested in. You can be a poet, you can be a musician, you can do the things that truly motivate you. And in an era in which we are about to lose 10, 20 million jobs in the next 5 years with autonomous vehicles that happen not only in the automobile transportation area, but in the aircraft transportation, in boats, in cargo ships, in all kinds of hospitality, as well as factory automation. There is just going to be an enormous number of folks that are going to be unemployed with skills equivalent to the coal miners that we currently have, who cannot be retrained, because it's kind of hard to get them Java trained in the time frame that would be productive for them. But you now have, with basic universal income, the ability to provide the training over an extended period of time so that the person can pursue whatever opportunities there. And I find it really silly that rich people tend to not like this the most. And the thing is, they should like it the most because now you have consumers armed with cash that are going to spend it, and the rich guys are going to get it anyway. And you've prevented the number one risk that our society has, and that is the 0.1% are probably going to get revolutionized out of the system when you piss off the poor people enough. And so you solve both ends of the problem. You solve the behavioral problem, the incentive problem, and you give people the liberty to go off and pursue whatever occupation they want to, earn as much additional income as you want, but pursue a happy life instead of being relegated to the coal mine, which you probably didn't want to do in the first place. So those are the sort of key components of why, and the studies that have been performed in this, and the implementations that have been done to date, whether it's in Finland, whether it's in India, have all confirmed that this is the behavioral modification that occurs instead of having nothing and being in a situation where in order to survive or feed your family, you got to rob 7-Elevens. You get to the point where the basic needs are taken care of, and you can pursue the kind of occupation and do the kinds of things that really, really motivate you.
I'm going to bring Jeff into the conversation. Jeff just walked in, Jeff Berwick, Dollar Vigilante. The question I get is that, I think Flip brings up some good points, but one of the things that, if maybe Jeff, you could talk about this, that we see already today elements of what you might call a basic income. We see that in the earned income credit system and the taxes. We see a lot of things that give people that they call basic income that they might get $10,000, $12,000, and people never leave the system. They always stay in that system of what I would call a lateral movement. It's or horizontal movement. It's just they go from one job to the other. That's the same type of jobs. How do you break that in maybe a free market enterprise, and talk a little bit about your idea in universal income?
Well, let me say you started off by saying your head hurt after hearing the common sense from Doug Casey. That might be because you have a lot of cognitive dissonance in your head and a lot of really wacky, sick ideas, actually. I want to actually just ask one question. Where does all this money come from that you're giving to all these people?
The same place all money comes from. Federal Reserves print the shit out of it.
Okay, so inflation, right? Okay. Do you not know anything about economics, that when you print up a lot of money, what happens to the money?
I'm also very much a fan of 000, Herman Cain's 999. I like the idea of absolutely no taxes being paid by anybody.
Me too. We could agree on that.
Only have the government issue whatever money it needs every year to satisfy the needs of the obligations it has. And therefore, individuals who have cash, as opposed to Bitcoin, let's just say, but who have cash can hedge it with other currencies if they think somebody else is going to perform better. Or they can keep it and hope that, like quantitative easing, good things happen at the end of it.
Well, basic economics is when you print up a lot of money, out of nothing, it destroys the value of that money. Are you not aware of that at all?
I am, except I don't believe it.
What?
Okay. Well, you.
And the
I don't
proof
believe it
is,
either.
the proof is the last 10 or 12 years, maybe 15 years,
Oh, yes.
there's been a lot of money printed.
Yeah, that's just 10 or 15 years, and there's been a lot of technological progress in that time. So the main reason that we haven't seen hyperinflation yet has been because it's actually squandered all of the wealth that's been created over the last 20 years. If you look at the world in the last 20 years, it's changed dramatically with the technology, with the internet, with apps and things. We have the largest hotel company in the world now, doesn't own any hotels, Airbnb. We have the largest taxi company in the world, doesn't own any taxis, it's Uber. So that we're getting more of this peer-to-peer sort of an economy. That, if we did not have the inflation that we've had from the Federal Reserve, which has actually been 5 to 10% per year for the last number of years, we would have had so much more wealth. It's been squandered because of inflation. But have you not looked at every single instance of hyperinflation in history? It's just printing money, and it turns into worthlessness very quickly. So you can't just look at the last 10 years and say that it's never, you're going to print up, like if you print up trillions and trillions of new dollars, it's going to obviously make the currency go down in value. That's just supply and demand.
I disagree.
Well, you can just say you disagree, but you have to have some
I'll give you
reasons.
my numbers if you give me a
have an
chance.
argument.
All right,
Yeah.
every hyperinflation in history has occurred because the country owed a big debt in a foreign currency that they didn't have control over. Take Germany, for example. So we're not talking about that. We're talking about printing money in order to stimulate your economy. You need to get the money out there first. You've got to have demand in order to create a supply. Suppliers are not going to produce unless they've got money, unless people are paying for it. Or, there's people with money. So here are my figures. We have a population of 323 million. Let's say you paid $1,000 to all adults per month and $500 to everyone under 18. That would come to 3.4 trillion. We already pay 1.8 trillion in, let's call this Social Security for all, basically. So we already pay in Social Security and welfare 1.8 trillion. So if you deduct that, you come out with 1.6 trillion that we're going to be adding to the system. You can easily get that back with, say, a 10% tax on, a sales tax on every transaction, and then a 4%. Let's say you do it in credit cards, or this
So
is a
you're
debit
going to
card.
use theft to add to the inflation. You're going to steal from people.
No, you're just basically going to trim a little.
Oh, just trim.
It's
It's not
a
theft, it's just
transaction
trimming?
tax. It's a transaction
Yeah,
tax.
let's call it trimming, not theft. This is all about social engineering. The people who want this are going to decide who gets what from whom.
In
and there's a certain
120 years,
elite that's going to decide.
AI is going to take every job. You're going to have to go.
Ellen, it's a social engineering thing. I mean, this always has bad results because you've got to use coercion
It
and
does
force.
not have bad results.
You've got to use coercion and force, and that always gives you bad results. Always, always, always.
Aren't you against theft?
It's not theft.
It's not that.
It's trimming.
It's trimming.
Okay.
That's
It's a
called-
transaction tax.
Oh,
Okay.
a tax is theft.
If you put the money out there, agreed, you've got to pull it back in some way. How are you going to pull it back? It's if you put a transaction tax on every transaction, you don't even have to give it back to the government. You just trim it off. Like the credit card can just deduct that.
Believe in
And
the government can solve
You've
these
got
things.
velocity of 7 in a good economy. If you multiply 7 by 14%, you're
Ellen,
going to
we
get
ought to put you in
100% back.
Washington DC, you can sit around a table like this with all those congressmen and talk about
I'm
this.
telling you,
Why
it's
is the
coming
government
because
involved-
there's
why is
really
the
no
government-
alternative. Are you
Why
going
is
to
the government
starve all
involved
those
in money
people?
at all? Have you asked yourself that question? Why does the government have anything to do with money? Why?
Well, they hardly have anything to do with the money. It's the Federal Reserve that has something to do with the money.
Right, well, that's an arm of the government.
Not really, it's owned by somebody else,
Well,
not by
not,
the government.
yes, I know, it's 50% owned by the US government and 50% owned by some big banks, but the fact is, the excess, the earnings of the Federal Reserve is all rebated to the US government, and it's controlled by the US government. Or the two of them, one's the master, one's the dog, I don't know which is which. But it's an arm of the US government for practical purposes.
Well, just the fact that you're saying the two ways to pay for it is inflation of the currency, which
It's not inflation of the currency. When
When
supply
you
and
print money-
demand go up together, prices remain stable. You're assuming that you pump a lot of money out there for things that are already there. That will, of course, drive up the price. But if you put money out there, like look in the Great Depression, you had fruit rotting on the ground and workers out of work. The only thing missing was the money. If you put the money out there, the workers will pick the fruit and sell it, and there'll be somebody to buy it. So you've got to get the demand out there before you can have.
But you need
before
to at
you
least
can have a
admit what
market.
you're saying, right? So you're saying you're printing up money, right? That's inflation. Like you can't just say, I call it something else. That's what it is. And that destroys the
It's
value of
not
the currency.
Inflation.
Ellen,
Inflation is when you have
would you
more,
answer the question I asked
too
you
much
before?
money creating too little goods and services. If you increase the services, the goods and services, prices will remain stable. That's the factor that is left out of the conventional.
But what a crazy idea that you're going to inflate the currency, which is printing up money out of nothing, which almost every time in history has ended up with the money becoming worthless. And then you want to add to it by robbing people. This is like an insane theory.
So the Fed just did
And then let's
3.7 trillion in quantitative easing. Of course, it never made it into the real economy, but
Right.
it did not create inflation.
Ellen,
I mean, it should have
ask-
created hyperinflation.
Doesn't it claim
That's
inflation?
the
You know how much money I've spent here in Aspen? It's $60 for my taxi here. I don't even know how, I ordered room service the other night. It was $120 for a cheese plate and a glass of
You ever
wine.
heard of Uber?
I did call Uber. It was $45 as well for a 10-minute ride. Anyway, like the prices are starting to go really nuts. But anyway, let's not even talk about how you want to inflate the currency and how you want to rob people. Let's talk about what the repercussions are for people who are on welfare. All of
We're talking about people that have no jobs and cannot get jobs because AI is going to beat them out of the market. That's the reason we need a universal basic income. It's the other alternative is let them starve. A number of economists there was a study of economists that found that in 120 years there will be no jobs, that AI will take
There'll be
all
no
the
jobs. I
In
always have a
45
job for
years, they
you.
will be
I need my
better.
shoes cleaned right now. You want to clean them? I'll give you $20.
A machine can
There's
do
a
it
job.
faster and better. And
Well, I prefer you do it because I want to see you actually do something productive with your life.
Ellen, this makes you a Luddite. You're probably unaware of the fact that when the Industrial Revolution came on, it unemployed huge numbers of people that were working in their huts on spinning machines, and now the steam-driven machines
Is
were
that the
much more
economy
productive.
do you want to be a worker in
No,
a car, in
no.
a factory putting parts into
Ellen,
a
that was
conveyor belt?
200 years ago,
We
okay?
now have AI that can do all that.
I know,
So
but this
let
is-
the people
Look,
do
I-
what's really productive, like Flip said.
Would you, first of all, would you answer my question? Why does the government have to be involved in money? This is a recent phenomenon, actually.
No, it's not. Government created our original money in the
Yes,
American colonies, which are.
it minted
You may
gold
have-
and
you may
silver
have-
coins. That's
You-
not getting
you-
involved in the
You may have missed the
monetary
part
system.
where I said there'd be no taxes, nobody would have to collect it, no IRS, no accountants necessary to
I know.
count it. All of those things, even the government would pretty much disappear and worry about nuclear weapons or something stupid like that.
I'm in favor of
Yeah, let him.
I'm sorry, I just.
No taxes.
Like, I've been sitting here and we're in a cryptocurrency conference, and I haven't heard the word cryptocurrency one time from anyone.
Well, that's because Ellen can't
No,
inflate the
no,
amount of
But
Bitcoin.
here's the solution. Okay. Right, well, that's a good point. That is a very good point, right? So why don't we use the masses who are by nature decentralized as nodes in a cryptocurrency mining operation for which they receive universal basic income?
You know, the thing that strikes me is you all seem to think like everyone's going to starve to death soon because of robots. As Doug was just sort of pointing out, all technological advances have improved human life to this point in history. And that's the whole idea that everyone needs a job. You know, if robots are doing everything, we'll live in Jetson sort of society. No one will even really have to do all that much.
Exactly. So
So
how are you
why
gonna feed
steal
them?
from people and why destroy the currency while you're at
How are
it?
you going to feed them if they don't?
Robots are gonna make us food. Robots are gonna farm for us, so
Okay, or make it free. That works for me. Why not? Yeah, sure, make it free. We all have free housing, we all have free food. Sure.
Well, there's certainly
Do
going
you know
to
what
be.
people do with free stuff? They destroy it.
No, they don't. In Yugoslavia, which was the best of the socialist models, you actually, well, I heard somebody that lived there during that time, and it was actually quite idyllic. You
Try to
could walk-
find someone on the street here who's homeless and say, I'm going to give you my condo. You come back in 2 months, you look at what happened to your condo. It'll almost always just be absolutely destroyed because they have no respect for it. They didn't have to earn it. They don't have the skills already to even know how to conduct their lives. That's why they're already living on the street for the most part. So welfare destroys people.
It's
Have you not
because
seen
They
this?
lost their house in the housing crisis.
And inheritance is also not that great, but you shouldn't be stealing it from the government to give it to other people either. Theft is always wrong. But welfare destroys people. Once you put people on something where they know they're going to get an income, why would they ever try to improve themselves or get better at anything?
That's not true. If you,
That's-
well,
that's a
like,
fallacy.
Well, I know for me personally, I was on unemployment insurance when I was 18. And if that unemployment, I just played video games and ate pizza all day, every day. And if that unemployment insurance didn't run out after 1 year, I'd still be sitting there eating pizza and playing video games. I swear I would have been. But it turned off and I had to go out, I had to get better, I had to learn lots, I had to find ways to add value to other people's lives. And, you know, to take that away from people is actually another sort of heinous crime.
You could work even if you had a basic income. It's not a
But people
prohibitor.
generally don't. The
That is not
incentive.
true. That is one of those
You want to live on
false
$1,000
thoughts.
a month?
It's
So you're saying if
4%,
you gave someone $1 million
3 or
a
4%.
year, they're going to
You're
go
gonna
work
give
at
them
McDonald's
$1,000
because
a
they just
month.
feel like
Food
it?
and
Nobody needs
shelter,
to
that's
work
all
at
you're gonna give them.
McDonald's.
What is a real-life example of what you're seeing, which is refuting what Jeff is saying? That it's a fallacy.
The fallacy is that the studies that have been performed with universal income have shown that most, not all, but most of the individuals in the 95% have pursued careers with additional money-earning activities and have felt passionately about the things that they were doing instead of being burdened by the tasks that they didn't want to do.
What are those studies? Like, you're looking for
I'm not armed with those studies, but I can tell you if you listen to Ted on the top, TED Talks, all you got to do is dial in for any of the universal basic income studies that are there, and they're very prolific in terms of.
Why, when you go into areas where they've had welfare for generations, is it not a really great place to
Okay, take
be?
England in the Middle Ages. There was something called the leisure class. And these were all people who were supported. They were very wealthy. And it was their duty, and they did do art, literature, science, religion. I mean, they were the ones that did the cultural development because they had a basic income and they didn't have to worry about slaving in the fields.
Why don't you take your money and give one person basic income right now?
I do, it's my son. And
Well, what's he
he's
doing? Is he
been
doing anything
very
productive?
with
Is
it.
he?
He
That's
spends
good.
all day doing this stuff, cryptography. He loves
Oh,
it, and he's
that's
passionate
great.
about it, and therefore I'm willing to support him.
But how about
So,
someone else? You got a little extra money, right? Why don't you support someone else? Why don't you do that?
That's all the money I got.
You have nothing extra?
I have Social Security and a pension, and that's what I live on.
Well,
Thank you
I have
very
bad
much.
news for you. You're not going to have that much longer because the U.S. dollar is going to hyperinflate to zero pretty soon. The
not
socialist
worried.
insecurity is bankrupt. So you
not
better
true.
get ready to polish some shoes.
I don't believe you.
You don't believe that? That's interesting.
I'm okay with destroying the current financial system.
Yeah, I'm down with that, too.
I love that.
Yeah.
No, it's very corrupt. It needs to be destroyed.
Yeah, absolutely.
I totally agree with you on that.
We just don't like the theft part.
Okay, so let's talk about
There's no
that,
theft if
destroying
you just
the,
create it.
let's talk about
That's-
destroying the financial
That's
system.
actually a theft on everyone who has the currency.
When we look
And they
around
should
here,
get
I
out of
just
that
heard from
currency
someone
and
here
get
in the
into
room.
Bitcoin.
Yeah,
I-
they will if you do that, that's for sure.
Perfect.
Okay, cool.
We're in Aspen. Obviously, as you just talked about how expensive it is here in Aspen. What's the saying here in Aspen? I just heard it. You either have 3 homes or 3 jobs. Isn't that kind of becoming now the case in a lot of places? We're now seeing, excuse me, we're seeing that, we're talking about basic income. We're seeing what in Saudi Arabia, where you have an elite class that basically gets a basic income of the 100,000 plus. And what do you have below that? You have a militant class of under people that, the migrant workers that are spewing revolution. Isn't that the kind of thing that we're seeing when you have that huge disparity?
Well, that elite class in Saudi Arabia, they're very productive people, constantly coming up with great art, great inventions, great, yeah, good point.
So I guess I wonder about that. So when we talk about, we give someone a basic income, we can't give them 10,000, 1,000 a month, can we?
Why not? Why not give them $1 million a month?
Sure you can.
Well, okay, that's earned income credit today. Anybody that gets into taxation and you actually understand taxes, I do taxes, I've done it for many years. You see someone who gets $15,000 a year, they walk in, have 2 or 3 children, they walk out, they get $8,000 to $10,000 in earned income credit at one shot. There's their basic income. They're there the next year, they're there the next year. I've seen them now for 20 years, these same people coming. And now they're taking their grandkids and they're putting them on these tax returns. It is basic income at that level you're talking about, and the level that Flip's talking about is the other one. That's 100,000, we're seeing that at huge disparities. So I think that what you guys are talking about, I'm sorry, I'm supposed to be the moderator here. But I have this question because I see the merits of, hey, it would be nice to see people, instead of having 3 jobs, to have some way of having some way to take care of themselves and be able to live life in a better way.
Well, the reason they have the 3 jobs has been through the inflation of the central bank. That's constantly,
So we need to destroy the system.
absolutely, yeah, down with that, absolutely. Get rid of all government, all taxes, for sure. But here's one question. If you gave everyone in the world $1 million a month basic income, you don't think there's going to be any repercussions in the economy?
I'm talking about $1,000 a month. And so.
Well, what
so
if it's
these
10,000?
welfare
So
people,
who
they-
makes
so
this
they have
number up?
23,000 a year. That's
So
still
1,000 doesn't
basic.
have any
They don't
effect,
have
but
enough
a
money
million
to do
does?
anything but raise their kids.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, let's open this up a little bit to outside. Obviously, question.
I'd love to see you all talk about the merits of universal basic income in terms of liberating and really empowering us to a more enlightened society on one level. To me, it definitely has merit. What I'm concerned about is that it does become a backdoor to a feudalist kind of oligarchical system on steroids, in the sense that I don't understand what happens to property values. And, because at that point, what would prevent people from taking on more leverage? Wouldn't those who have capital buy up all the real estate that exists? Would you have to put restrictions on who can own what private property? Wouldn't rents double and triple? And would we be back in a similar situation? So I'd love to hear what you have to say about that.
Well, I think that, yeah, that's sort of the point, is the repercussions of this printing up of money. You say $1,000 isn't going to affect anything. It does. It will absolutely affect everything, affect the price of everything. The price of everything will just go up. And so that's what inflation does. And you can say that didn't happen in the last 10 or 15 years. It really did. Look at the cost of a school education. No one should even bother going to college anyway. It's a complete waste of time. But if they do, it's like hundreds of thousands of dollars now. This has gone up dramatically. There's been massive inflation. You look at some of the prices of houses now. You're talking $250 million for houses. There's been absolutely massive inflation. And that's what happens when you print up money.
It's not because of that 3.7 trillion that the Fed printed. What they did was, it's all in the reserve system of the banks. It never made it into the real economy. So all they did was swap. The banks had bonds, they swapped the bonds for dollars, or for reserves, basically. So the banks can't do anything with it but lend it to other banks. They can't lend it into the real economy, and that's the reason it didn't affect the economy. There has been, in fact, inflation in things like housing, and that's because that's where all the speculative money is going, because there's no place else to put it.
That's what inflation does, yeah.
But it's not because there's more money in the system. There is not more money in the system.
There's a lot more money in the system.
But it's all, as you're saying, it's all just moving between banks.
No, it's not just that 3.7 trillion or whatever you're talking about. They inflate the money supply every year it's around 10% per year right now.
You know, these social engineers come up with a new cockamamie idea every once in a while. This idea will probably go into the dustbin of history. I don't know what the next one will be, but it's always, we have to do something with all those other people out there. We have to save them, and we'll get the money some way. Okay, we'll either steal it by taxing or steal it by inflation. It's crazy. It's all about the government will solve all of this. And this is the latest scheme for the government to kiss everything and make it better. It's going to destroy civilization in the long run.
Do you think that Doug and myself really want to hurt people, that we want to see people poor? Do you think that's really our objective here? Because I'll tell you, our objective is to use our knowledge of economics.
I think you're working on the wrong economic model.
Well, I disagree, and I have all of
sure you
history.
do.
I have all of history to prove. Like the fact that you don't even know how inflation works is unbelievable. If you inflate the currency, it destroys the value of the currency, and that impoverishes all the poor people. The people who have assets, and that's the people who have the houses here in Aspen, they just continue to get richer and richer. So you're talking about that disparity. That's caused by inflation. So when you cause it with even more inflation, you just destroy everything. It's like, just look at all communist sort of societies, right? You didn't even respond to that. Why is Venezuela not doing that well? It was redistributing everything. It's free electricity. Why is it not doing well?
Largely because we've regulated them out of existence.
We regulated them? I didn't regulate anyone.
It's not regulated, largely because we've threatened them. Well, I don't know.
We?
Anyway,
I didn't threaten
we
anybody.
did,
You
actually.
talk about weird.
They were doing quite well in 2000 when they went.
I was just there, by the way.
The economy collapsed in 2000.
Ellen, it's impossible to have a conversation with
So when you replace everybody who's working there, that's what happened in Venezuela. It wasn't just inflation. They had a well-working system that they basically
No, it wasn't just inflation. It was communism, yes.
inside out, and then they had no reserve capital. Nothing works efficiently, you need efficiency.
But these are places that tried to give people the basic needs, right? That was the whole Chavez sort of a thing. And your whole thing is that we regulated them? I didn't do anything.
Sorry, I shouldn't use the word regulate.
Okay, so the U.S. government
I
did.
meant
So you're saying
military threat.
I was in Venezuela about a year ago, and it was already pretty bad. And I did not see any, I went there with an open mind. I did not see any anything that really showed that they were being hurt by the U.S. government that much. And believe me, I hate the U.S. government more than anyone else in the world. So if I could find any reason, I would have just lambasted them. But it was really the Venezuelan government with their communism, which destroys the incentive for people to want to work, which is essentially the same as this universal basic income. It actually destroys incentive to work. And when that happens, you don't have anyone who wants to be more productive because they're like, well, I'm going to get the money anyway. He's going to get the money anyway. It becomes they all destroy themselves, and essentially it works against human nature. So to go back to my point earlier, the whole reason that I'm really adamant that this is a bad idea is because if you do this, you will hurt so many people, like millions or billions of people. It'll be turned into Venezuela, turn into Cuba, and people will be just basically trying to find animals in the streets to eat.
Okay, so let's talk about human nature for a minute, because I think it's human nature to strive for more, right? I mean, like, if you're provided for in some meager way, it isn't really human nature to stay at that level. So, I mean, we already have things like food stamps. We have programs that provide for people on a basic level. So why are we afraid of doing that with a universal basic income?
You know why the zoo says don't feed the animals? Because they don't feed the bears. You ever see the signs? Don't feed the bears.
Yeah.
Because then they get dependent, and they're like, well, why should I go hunt for food? I can just come over here, right? I can rip
Well,
apart.
like, for instance, my father's a truck driver, and I work in technology, and he asked me a lot, like, when's it going to happen? Like, when is he going to lose his job, or when is it just not going to become a thing to drive a truck anymore?
5 to 10 years?
Right, and that's what I tell him, and maybe even sooner,
Tell
Well,
him
hey,
not
That's
to
a good
worry
thing,
about it.
because everything gets free. Sorry for interrupting, but
Luckily-
remember when they were arguing about the cotton gin? We can't have the technology, the robots pick cotton. We can't free the slaves because who's going to pick the cotton? When technology comes and takes over
No, that's fine. I
our
agree.
jobs, we just go and do other jobs that robots can't do.
Absolutely, but
There's an absolute positive idea there, and that is that, yes, there will be additional jobs, very creative jobs that will become available.
experience economy.
But on the other hand, there are, for example, digital autonomous organizations which will have no employees, will simply do a great job of providing at the right cost the goods and services that I think we all want. So for example, Uber doesn't need any employees. The next step for Uber, or Uber-like businesses, is to disintermediate the employee base and to get rid of everyone who works at Uber in a situation where software is the business.
Right.
Now, the bottom line for that is that since you don't need any drivers running Uber, how do you tidy them over into being creative in other ways? Perhaps becoming programmers and contributing to open source for other companies to be creative. Just like this entire environment here that we're talking about in Bitcoin, those fundamentals of blockchain are going to be exploited, and there will be jobs created in that regard, and people who contribute code will get tokens that'll give them income over and above their basic universal income. And just so to call the bear what the bear is, yes, we choose not to give basic income with no restrictions on how to spend it because we compensate for it by providing welfare at the other end. It's not like we're creating new money to pay for this. We're just recategorizing the money into you can spend it any way you want. You have the liberty to do whatever you want with it. You don't have to do what we tell you to do with that money. And on top of that, you can get the most productive job, train yourself, give yourself the opportunity, and become, the next token holder of the energy company that'll dominate energy distribution that has no employees.
So
It doesn't seem to bother anybody that this is all talk about social engineering, where really smart people figure out what all you chimpanzees get to do. But it's worse than that. Don't call them social engineers, call them busybodies. They want to stick their noses into everybody's
Okay.
business and say, this is better for you, we'll do it my way.
There's just a, here's your basic income, do with it what you want, and live your life the way you want to.
Where's the capital come from?
From
that
the
you're
same
giving to
place
these
that you're
people?
now paying welfare.
So we are rebuilding Puerto Rico, are we not?
Just really quickly, though, that was it.
Who's
Hold on,
we?
hold on. I mean, we.
You just want to
Puerto
redistribute
Rico-
wealth to
Puerto
everyone?
Rico
That's
needs
it?
help.
Without
That's it,
increasing the amount?
Oh, I didn't say about the amount.
Oh, well, increasing the amount, you'd have
Probably
to
the amount
decide.
would go up
Just like
because
with
we
a
get rid of
natural
the government.
disaster, just like with a natural disaster in Puerto Rico, where I don't know how many billions of dollars were lost through no fault of the residents whatsoever, we are experiencing a liquidation of intellectual and experiential capital that is an equivalent, if unseen, catastrophe. And we need to help the people that are affected by this catastrophe.
Exactly helping Puerto Rico with UBI?
I'm saying that technology has presented opportunities as well as crises. Like automation of,
Well, technology didn't cause a crisis in the plant in Puerto Rico.
no, I'm just saying, I'm saying through no fault, like we don't blame the Puerto Ricans for living in a, for being hit by a hurricane.
Well, you kind of should in a little ways. They decided to live there in a hurricane zone, right?
I mean, is it
Right? Like they had the option.
The fact is,
They
there are
did.
more jobs. I have 42 years experience.
I'm just saying.
Before I got into what I'm doing now. There are more jobs every year that go unfilled because there's a lack of qualified and motivated workforce in this country. There are more skilled jobs, 5 million, I think, right now, that companies can't fill. Because the workforce either isn't qualified or isn't.
Do you think my 62-year-old father is going to learn how to code in
No,
3 years?
and that's a different conversation, but.
Is it?
They have to learn to do something, for sure.
Well, I mean, but.
Is that a
but
bad
here's-
thing that he
here's
has
the
to
thing. I'm saying
learn
he
how to do
earns-
something?
He earns enough to pay for his farm right now, okay? Like, he earns that because he's a truck driver. He has no other opportunity to earn that much money, for the rest of his life. And when he loses his job, he will lose his farm. And I think you can see that repeated over and over again.
Do you guys, I mean, this is just a comment on airplane pilots. There is a theoretical resistance on the part of us who fly. And we don't like the idea theoretically of there being no pilot flying the plane. That, of course, is going to happen. The plane will fly without a pilot. And they'll probably put somebody in the cockpit for $12 an hour to make it look like there's somebody flying that airplane. Just like the tugboats and the ships and the railroads and the Uber cars and the transportation and the trucking and everything else that is going to be decimated in terms of those kinds of menial jobs being available. Now, we will, if we leave the system alone, many of those, like the Ohio coal miners, which seem to be highlighted as an example, they will all be without jobs and welfare will be provided to them because that's the way the system works, and that system sucks. First and foremost, when you give welfare to somebody, you demean them. If you give them income with they can choose to burn it if they want to. They can choose to use it for their education. They can do whatever they want with it, no restrictions. That puts a different form of liberty and behavioral characteristics on the people who receive it. You give them food stamps, you're locking them into jail. You give them universal basic income, you're giving them freedom. It is not the same thing, because if you control what you can spend that money on, and I'm telling you what to do, that's a different bureaucracy than the one that says,
Food stamps, they sell that for cash and they spend it on whatever they want.
they can do that.
But I'm just saying, it's you're just rebranding, it's not the same
Cents on
thing.
the dollar.
The whole problem with,
We're giving for nothing, just.
No. It's a form of saying that technology is going to improve all our lives. Technology is going to make the millennials not lament the fact that they don't really want that kind of job because it sucks. Okay?
But the generations have to work those shitty jobs.
If you like the current system, if you like the way that works, fine. Don't be part of the movement that tries to instill universal basic income. I'm going to tell you one thing that I don't know shit. All I can tell you is that from my standpoint, from what I've researched, from what I do know, universal basic income is inevitable.
Yeah,
It's just the
agreed.
way it will be done.
If it is,
not inevitable.
it'll be gone within a few years. It'll destroy itself. It'll destroy the whole economy.
Turned in as a response, not as a proactive reasoning. If you say it's inevitable.
For example, Hawaii has already legislatively passed universal basic income. Finland does.
Everybody in Hawaii.
India will.
Not now.
Well,
Not now.
but the fact of the matter is that welfare isn't something we can ignore. It's there already. The food stamps are there already. Anyone who loses their job for an extended period of time and is without ability to pay, if you're a coal miner in whatever decimated industry, do you think that they just live on zero? Or do you think somebody gives them something every month?
That's wrong, doesn't mean you need to do that.
Well, no, all I would
everybody
say is universal basic income is being presented as an alternative. To all of us, it behooves to come up with an even better alternative because the shit's gonna hit the fan anyway. There is no chance that it isn't. It is gonna hit the fan.
When the shit
And
hits-
I'm going to have to,
Immigration, because everyone's gonna show up at the door.
okay, I'm going to have to cut this off. We're getting, running out of time here. I think we've had a pretty lively discussion. I think we can say that. How about we give a hand to everybody here on the panel? It's a great question. I hope we keep asking it. Thank you.
These things never accomplish anything because this is a question of psychology, not an intellectual thing.
No, because it's a technology question, because if technology